Before I begin, I want to, as they used to say in the Senate, a point of personal privilege. You can't see this picture I was given. In the back, it's a picture of the field house at my alma mater, the University of Delaware. Now, I want to point out something to you. All the way back in '79, the University of Delaware started what they call their solar house. They were building a solar house and trying to generate some interest in the industry. Now, that field house brings back, I must admit, bad memories. If you played football at the University of Delaware in what they call the spring practice, we have 20 days to practice in the spring, always cold and snow, and it's really bad weather. You go inside that field house. And inside that field house, it was just dirt. There was no grass. And when you weighed, you're 6'1", 157 pounds, playing defensive halfback, it was a very, very unpleasant place to be. And we used to call it Armadillo Day, meaning everybody on the team and the squad would put as many pads on their elbows, their knees, their necks, their backs. But here's what they did. If you can't see it from here, but the solar array placed on that field house is saving the university a lot of money, making sure that we make clear to the whole state of Delaware why solar is so important. And I just wanted you to know that. The two things, we're the first state, and secondly, we've got a great solar array at the University of Delaware. I just want you to know that. And I thank you for presenting me with a picture. It's great to be in Anaheim. Right here in this convention center, there's a huge solar array on this roof, one of the largest of its kind in the country, 3.6 million kilowatt hours of electricity each year, enough to power 600 homes. And it's incredible. It can be replicated. It's being replicated within 75 miles of this location. There's high schools and there's other venues that are doing just this. And what you all are doing, I remember the first such event I attended of solar power. This middle section right here would have been an overflow crowd at the time. Not a joke. Not a joke. My wife, who's a community college professor, says that the best kept secret in America is community colleges, and she says we're going to let this secret out. What's happening is you're letting the secret out. I really mean this sincerely. The more Americans who understand the possibilities of solar, this is going to increase exponentially. It's happening all across the country. Just imagine how much more we can do. How many jobs? Imagine how many fewer cases of premature death, heart attack, childhood asthma. Imagine the net savings to consumers and taxpayers. Folks, because of you, we're on the cusp of something huge here. But a lot of folks don't realize it. Since the President and I took office, not because of us, but I hope we helped, solar power generation has increased 20-fold. And it's exponentially increasing more now. Solar jobs have grown by more than 86%. 174,000 jobs. Now, put this in perspective in California. That's more people than work at Google, Apple, Twitter combined. And they're important. They're important. You always hear about that. But let's put this in a little bit of perspective. And also Facebook, if I'm not mistaken. And that's going to grow by the end of this year to 210,000 jobs, powering 4.6 million homes. Solar installations have increased nearly 50% per year since 2008. And will go from around 20,000 solar installations in 2009 to 1 million installations next year. And by the way, wind power has tripled as well. 50,000 jobs supply wind power to more than 16 million homes. Wind power, by the end of, within 35 years, could generate another 600,000 jobs. And these are good, decent paying jobs. These are not minimum wage jobs. These are real jobs you can raise a family on. And we got into this incredible moment by basic, as we'd say, if I go back to the field house, blocking and tackling. just basic things. The federal government invested seed money for R&D and for promising technologies. Companies in those sectors, many of you in front of me today, subsequently unleashed unprecedented clean energy innovations. The Recovery Act, which was much maligned, and I led that, and I was much maligned in the process. There's a lot of reason to malign me, but that's not one. I might add, though, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office assessed that less than 2/3 of 1% waste, fraud, or abuse existed in over an $800 billion program. And in the process, we invested $90 billion, roughly $90 billion in clean energy. We expanded the tax credits for renewable energy production that have helped your companies make capital investments and deploy new technologies and products. We worked with industries from automakers to appliance manufacturers, set the bar for new innovation and energy efficiencies. These decisions have been consequential. You know it better than I. This is like, as they say, preaching to the choir. First, during that god-awful recession when banks froze lending, our Recovery Act efforts ignited almost a whole new solar industry, and nearly a $20 billion market in the United States that makes renewables competitive with oil and gas. You're getting awful close with solar. With coal, you're getting closer. Second, we significantly reduced the cost of renewable energy. I should say you did. The cost of solar has fallen by about 1/2 since 2010. The cost of solar power is at an all-time low, and we're seeing cost of 3.87 cents per kilowatt hour. For perspective, in 2009, it was 15.1 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, I know you know all this, but the press is here. And it's important to let the secret out. As I said, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's important. It's important that people understand what you've done. And third, we're wasting less energy. That's cut 2.2 billion tons of carbon pollution from appliances and saved consumers hundreds of billions of dollars over the coming decades. By 2025, we expect to double fuel efficiency to 54.5 miles per gallon, saving American families $1.7 trillion at the gas pump. And we keep leading the world in new energy transformation, but that's producing cleaner and more sustainable forms of energy. Look, just take a look at the President's Climate Action Plan. It puts for the first time limits on carbon pollution from power plants, the single largest source of harmful carbon pollution in the United States. But it doesn't just do that, because we know, by the way, change generates winners and losers. There's an awful lot of really hard working, decent coal miners who are looking out there and not only seeing their income maybe changing, but seeing their cultural way of life. It's all, I come from a coal region. It's a way of life, and they're worried. That's why we also put in this help for communities and workers, particularly folks in the coal industry, to transition to low carbon, clean energy economy, transition to better and newer jobs. It builds up our community's resilience as well to climate change, with more resilient roads, bridges, water systems, buildings to withstand future wildfires, floods, and superstorms. The plan helps us lead the world in the fight against climate change. This evening, I leave here, and I'll be heading I'll be leaving here right after this speech, and I'm heading up to Los Angeles to speak at the U.S.-China Climate Leadership Summit in Los Angeles in advance of President Xi's visit to Washington next week and leading up to the big climate conference in Paris later this year. We'll highlight the fact that 30 American and Chinese cities signed the first of its kind Climate Leaders Declaration, so cities can, one, set ambitious emission targets in both countries, report greenhouse gas emissions regularly, come up with a climate action plan for their communities, and enhance cooperation and partnership among cities. Consider that the 11 Chinese cities who will be present at this conference represent 25% of China's urban carbon pollution. That's the equivalent of all the carbon pollution in Japan or Brazil. Just the cities represented in Los Angeles later this evening. But our efforts to lead the world depends on not the example of our power, but the power of our example. We have to, in order to lead the world, set the example. That's why the President planned to set the goal to double renewable energy generation by 2020. I'm confident that's fully within the power, within your wheelhouse. I quite frankly think we'll exceed that. And I won't go into the reasons why now in the interest of time. So today, I'm announcing a $102 million competitive grant to companies, universities, and research laboratories in 15 states to focus specifically on expanding solar power here in America. It's part of the Sunspot initiative to scale up solar, and it's a simple idea with profound consequences. Reduce the cost of solar by another 75% by 2020. Cut red tape and get next generation technologies to the market faster. Provide technical assistance to cities and households that want to go solar, and create tens of thousands of more solar jobs. It's working. You're making it work. We're already ahead of schedule. And if we stay at it, in my view, we can make it faster, easier, and more affordable for Americans to choose clean, reliable energy to power. Look, it's actually, I truly believe it's at our fingertips. It's within our reach. You can almost taste it. You can feel it. But we also know that there's some real challenges ahead. We know that the private sector can only thrive where they have certainty in the investor environment, where there is free and fair competition, where intellectual property is protected, where trade rules are followed. By the way, I'd note parenthetically, that's why so many American manufacturers are coming home. That's why they're coming back. Your children aren't going to hear about outsourcing. They're going to be talking about insourcing in their generation. And I know that's something all of you here care deeply about, and it's something the President and I care deeply about. I also know you care about modernizing the entire energy infrastructure, which is a topic for another speech. But earlier this year, Secretary of Energy Moniz and I released the first part of a roadmap to make our entire energy infrastructure more reliable, resilient, safer, and more secure, and in the process, enabling us to create millions of new, good-paying jobs. Our recommendation is ensuring that transmission lines can carry solar and wind energy from where they're produced to where they are used. The demand is there. This year, solar has constituted 40% of all the new electrical generation capacity brought online in the United States of America. And the jobs, that's you. And the jobs are there. 1 million workers now take care of our transmission, storage, distribution infrastructure. If we make the right investments, we could support another 1.5 million jobs on top of that. The technology's there. The Department of Energy is pushing to deploy distributed generation, like microgrids and rooftop solar with battery storages. We want to give every American a choice, an energy choice, what they want to use, no matter who they are or where they live. Look, this isn't a government mandate. It's the market working. I love these guys who talk about the market. This is the market working. Whether or not you care about climate change, you're finding out that you can call a guy up today. Tomorrow he can show up, put solar panels on in the morning, and they're up by dinner, and you're saving money. People didn't think that was possible, but it is. And guess what? Utilities are noticing too. I find this fascinating. Excuse me for being a bit, anyway. I find this fascinating. Net metering, for example. If you have a big solar array on your roof at noon, you're probably going to generate more power than you need at night. So what happens? I know you all know this. Under net metering, you can sell that power back to the utilities and get credit for it. Save money off your bill, maybe end up not paying much of anything on your bill. Now, if I told you 10 years ago there would be a debate whether or not we're giving consumers too much freedom to choose how much and what type of energy they generate, I doubt whether you would have thought that was ever likely to happen. You'd say, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But look what's happening. Folks are saying, I get it, I can afford it. But some of the most deep-pocketed special interests that have lobbied for years for fossil fuels are now saying, let's stop it. Let's take away consumer choice. Let's stifle the market. Isn't it amazing? The market is saying. That's how the market works. Not government, the market. So anyone who thinks it's not happening, just take a look at the market. It's a competitive choice for consumers. It's not the government making the choice. And look at the special interest backed by the Koch brothers, fine guys as I understand it. Groups like the American Legislative Exchange Council. They've successfully argued for limits on the amount of net metered systems, like what they've successfully done in Wisconsin. It's the special interest pushing back on a fundamental change at every level, trying to alter how the market functions. Look at what they're doing on the critical tax credits that have ramped up renewable energy production over the last 6.5 years. Put this in perspective. For I don't know how many years now, we provide over $5 billion a year in tax credits to the oil industry. Now, at one point, arguably, that made a lot of sense. For every well you dug, for every 10 well you dug, you came up dry on, I don't know, 6, 7, 5, 9. So we had to encourage people to go out and sink those wells. Anybody having a problem getting oil out of the ground today? Are we a little short on that now? I think we have to continue to incentivize by $5 billion a year the oil industry to drill. Folks, the private will tell you they don't need that tax credit. They're not having to take the risks they used to. If we just took half of that and apply it to renewables as a tax credit, just like we did the oil and gas industry when they needed it, it would cover the total cost of all the tax credits on a yearly basis we're talking about. And there'd be about $2.5 billion left. We could reduce the deficit. We could actually invest in things middle-class people need. One report released this week found that solar energy could quadruple by 2022 if we extend these tax credits. Quadruple. Now look, you're talking about over 700,000 homes now. That would mean another 3 million homes. And that's a low number. You guys have higher estimates. And if we eliminated unnecessary fossil fuel subsidies worldwide, the report goes on, we would cut carbon pollution worldwide by 10%. Just eliminating the subsidies for oil and gas worldwide. Now, some places they need to do it to compensate for the ability of the poor to be able to manage to turn on the lights. But that just puts it in perspective how consequential it is. We need to set an example for the whole world by eliminating these wasteful, unnecessary subsidies. There's a fancy term, you all know it, a tax expenditure. That means you owe taxes, but we're not going to collect them for some reason. A lot of them make some sense. We want to encourage people to buy homes so they get to deduct their mortgage interest and so on. There's a lot of things. But there are now $1.2 trillion in tax expenditures on a yearly basis. $1.2 trillion not collected every year that otherwise would be collected under the tax code. That's double what it was in the Reagan era when it was about $600 billion in tax expenditures. Imagine what we can do if we eliminate unnecessary, non-productive, wasteful tax expenditures that no longer have any applicability, no longer meet the need they were initially put forward for. The idea that we don't think renewable is so critical to the future of this country and we won't do everything to grow this industry is absolutely absurd. I mean, it really is absurd. Our children and grandchildren are going to look back on this period of this debate and wonder, what were they debating about? I'm not joking. I'm truly not kidding. This will be one of those debates. What were they debating about? The stakes are too high for short-sighted politics and short-term policy decisions. And I want to reiterate again, there are some winners and losers, and we have to take care of the hard-working losers who end up in industries that aren't going to be used as much. I think that's a moral obligation we have to them. But that is not a reason to continue a policy that is so damaging to our environment. But you know, there are still folks out there, particularly in the other party, who, we may hear it tonight. I thought I was walking into the Reagan Library. I guess it's not the place, but at the Reagan Library, now you're going to hear people, I suspect, if not there, I know my colleagues in the Republican House caucus and some Democrats, some Republicans in the Senate who deny climate change. I think if you push them, they probably deny gravity as well. But look, we set out a budget that is focused on renewable energy and creating initiatives to alter it. For every $1 of federal dollars we put in, we generate $5 to $7 coming from the market to invest. But that White House budget, the Republicans have passed a budget that slashes, for example, the Energy Department's energy efficiency and renewable energy budget by 40%. It's 2015. 2015. And they slash it by 40%. They've also doubled down on sequestration, a word that's now part of the political lexicon, despite the devastating cuts to scientific research and development. All of the brilliant minds we have in this country, all of the entrepreneurial instincts we have in this country, of all times, to invest less in R&D, including companies investing less in R&D. What are we doing? And now they're calling for a shutdown of the government, some of them, over whether or not to allow millions of women access to essential health care. Folks, we're getting in our own way. If some of these folks would just get out of the way. No, I'm being serious. Some Democrats too, just get out of the way. Get out of the way. Let the will of the people prevail. Let the market operate. Let's do it. This is nothing, this is not rocket science. This is old-fashioned. The old-fashioned way we've always grown this country. We've always grown the economy. If we set up and step up and capture this energy transformation, we're going to create a virtuous cycle of good-paying jobs, attracting companies to our shores, keeping companies on our shores, keeping them from leaving. A.T. Kearney does a survey every year. They go out and they test, they survey the 300 largest industrialists in the world, and they ask the same question every year. I think it's been like 19 years. Don't hold me to the number of years they've been doing it. For the first year this year, in every single category, from IT to manufacturing to service economy, they say, by the larger margin than ever in the history of the survey, the best place in the world to invest is the United States of America. There's a reason for that. So it's not just jobs in the solar field we're talking about. You will continually increase the number of people in the solar field, or the wind farms, or the construction sites. It's jobs in factories making glass and steel, turbines. There's jobs in factories making panels, blades, gearboxes. It's more people working at the diner near where the plant exists. It's more people being able to go to the movie theater. It's more people being able to pay for their kids' college tuition. It literally generates a virtuous cycle. Good, decent paying jobs for engineers, construction workers, truck drivers, utility operators, electricians, up and down the supply chain. Jobs for a whole lot of veterans. You in the solar industry employ more veterans than any other parts of the economy, and thank you for doing that. I've often said, and sometimes criticized for it, government has a lot of obligations. There's only one sacred obligation: to care for those who we send to war and care for them and their families when they come home. It's something my wife Jill and the First Lady have spent a lot of time the last 7 years through joining forces, providing opportunities for veterans coming home. As the President said, they shouldn't have to fight in some FOB, forward operating base, and then come home and have to fight for a job. And we'll all benefit. We'll all benefit from a cleaner environment and a stronger economy. Even those people who want to stop us from investing in the kinds of things you're doing, they will breathe cleaner air. They will be in better shape. No one will be worse off. It's no longer an either-or proposition, folks. I'll close with a story. Last year, I spoke at the Goldman Sachs North American Energy Conference in New York City. And at that conference were an awful lot of major investors. I don't know, there were 75, 100, 150, I don't know what, it was a small amphitheater. And I looked at them, and obviously I'm no investment specialist, listed as the poorest man in Congress. I'm not. I made a dumb decision when I was 29. I was asked a question in the last debate, what's your position owning stock? I said, if I get elected, I'll never own a share of stock for conflict. Someone should have told me no. And I've never owned a share of stock, other than what's in the retirement plan I don't control. So I asked them, I looked at this audience. I said, gentlemen, ladies, what is the long play? What's in our energy future? As I said, to state the obvious, I'm no investment banker. But I told the audience, full of bankers and investors, that I wouldn't go long on investments that lead to carbon pollution. I'd bet on clean energy. And they all agreed. Because look what's happening now. Major multi-billion-dollar companies now are pricing in the cost of carbon when they make their business decisions. Google prices it at $30 per metric ton. Disney, 10 to 20. I could go on with all the corporations. It's become an economic imperative to look at. But there's a whole lot of other reasons why we have to make these investments. There's a climate change argument, there's a national security argument, there's an economic argument. But as you're going to hear from the Pope, there's also a moral argument. There's also a moral argument. I know that's not in vogue for a public official like me to talk about a moral argument, but there is a moral argument. You know, way back in 1986, I introduced the first piece of climate change legislation in the United States Congress. At the time I said, mark my words, reality has a way of intruding. Reality always intrudes. And I'm not offering that legislation in '86 as some panacea. But I talked about reality has a way of intruding. And we're seeing it all across the country and around the world. Reality is intruding. Extreme heat waves, superstorms, droughts, and the list goes on. And we're going to see a lot more. If we're lucky and work hard, we can freeze things as they are now. But we got a long way to go. As a side note, the Department of Defense says this presents a national security danger. This is not new in our administration. The Department of Defense has done a lengthy report. It said climate change generates serious national security problems for us. As sea levels rise, superstorms increase. They not only cause death and destruction, but mass migrations. Imagine sea level increasing another 2 feet in Indonesia, all of South Asia. Tens of millions of people will need to migrate. We've seen already what happens with climate change. Just look at Darfur and the carnage that's occurred over the last 10 years because arable land is no longer available. Make no mistake about it, folks. Climate change is caused by human endeavors, and it's an existential threat to this planet. And I'm not talking about leaving our children a better future. What's at stake is whether we have a future at all over the long run. What's the future of this planet? If we move now, we can cauterize this wound. But we have to move fast. That realization is shared by an overwhelming consensus of scientists. It's shared by 74% of the American people and a vast majority of American enterprise. And now we and the rest of the world are trying to sprint, not walk, toward confronting this problem. And we have 3 incredible assets in this country that few other countries have that allow us to seize the moment, to save our climate and usher in a clean energy future. One is that there's a consensus among the American people, notwithstanding the minority is able to stop it under our system, but there's a consensus. Make no mistake about it. 2, we have the most advanced scientific and technological skill set in the world. Because as Steve Jobs said, you know, a kid asked him, what do I have to be more like you? He said, think different. I'd say slightly different. You can't think different where you can't breathe free air, where you can't say what's ever in your mind, where you can't challenge orthodoxy. There's not a single child in America, even in our school system, which gets criticized for challenging orthodoxy, unlike any other country in the world. It's stamped into our DNA. It's a gigantic, gigantic, gigantic asset. And thirdly, we have an economic system that accommodates this change quickly. We're the most agile venture capitalists in the world. And maybe most importantly, we have the ability to solve consequential problems. It's stamped into our DNA. I'm going to be meeting with President Xi again in a couple days. I've spent hours and hours with him when he was vice president, traveling China and here. One night at a private dinner, he and I, one staffer and a translator, he asked me, how would you define America? And it was easy. I said, I can define it in one word, Mr. then Vice President. Possibilities. 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 Americans believe that anything is possible if we put our mind to it. And darn it, we better continue to put our mind to it. We explore, we invent, we build, we break down barriers. We never stop. If there's any group of Americans who I don't have to explain this to, it's probably all of you. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing for our country. Thank you for what you're doing for the world. Thank you all. May God bless you, and may God protect our troops. Keep it going. We need you badly. Thank you. Take my picture. Thank you very much.